We read in Deuteronomy 16 that all Jewish people were summoned to the temple 3 times a year, at the feasts of Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. Why were these 3 feasts specifically chosen, and how does that speak to us today? Thank you.
That is a very pertinent question. The passage you're referring to is Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16, where we read, 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord your God in the place which he chooses, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and at the feast of booths, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. So these were the times when all Israel, men, women, and children, as we understand from other passages, were to appear before God with an offering in hand, thus recognizing God's sovereignty over their lives and as the one who is actually the source of their blessings. These were times of great festivities where they would have a communal meal. Now, why choose these 3 feasts, unleavened bread, or Passover with Pentecost and Tabernacles? We are not specifically told the reason why. If these feasts were equally separated during the year, we could have seen a 3-time-a-year reminder together, but between unleavened bread and Pentecost, they are less than 2 months, and between Pentecost and Tabernacles, they are about 5 months. So these 3 feasts are not equally separated in time over the course of the year. However, we can find an answer by considering that one common denominator running through the 7 feasts of Israel that are listed in Leviticus 23, the 7 feasts of the Lord in the Torah, they all speak of the different ministries of the Messiah. And when we consider these 3 feasts in relation to the Messiah, something beautiful comes out. Studying the Messiah in the Tanakh, we can see 3 aspects of his work of redemption, that is of prophet, priest, and king. And what we discover is that in these 3 feasts, each one is stamped by one of those offices. Unleavened bread or Passover represents his office of prophet. Yeshua first came to offer his life as a sacrifice for our salvation. The feast of unleavened bread speaks of his sinlessness, since leaven represents sin, and he was perfectly fit to die for us. Pentecost represents his office of priest, as he is now sitting at the right hand of God as our high priest. As the Spirit says in Hebrews chapter 8, verse 1, we have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. That he is now our high priest is the fulfillment of the feast of Pentecost. Then the feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot represents his office of king, for he will come back as the King of Kings. When John saw him at his second coming, he wrote, and he saw on his robe and on his tithe a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is in Revelation 19:16. So we can see these 3 offices of the Messiah in these 3 feasts. But there's more. There is more. We can also see in these 3 feasts 3 major dispensations or time periods where the Lord spoke to us, which together stamp 3 important periods in history. Passover stamps the dispensation of the law. Pentecost stamped the dispensation of grace. Tabernacle points to the dispensation of the kingdom or the messianic time or the millennium. Of course, all of this may not have been obvious to all Israelites at that time, but every element in the Torah was designed to prepare the individual to meet the Messiah, to meet Yeshua. From the tabernacle itself to the sacrifices, including the feast, they all pointed to the Messiah and confirmed his redemptive work. The Tanakh not only tells us from which tribe Yeshua came from, where he was to be born, the time of his first coming, and even the manner of his death and the manner of his resurrection. And we are also given prophecies all along confirming these things, as we also get to celebrate the Messiah all year long.